Are you a GitHub beginner looking to learn the basics? This video is for you. Welcome to GitHub 101, branching, committing, and pull requests. In this video, we'll cover what is GitHub, branching and committing, the pull request workflow, a hands-on example of branching and creating a pull request, and a bonus at the end of helpful everyday Git best practices that can make you a better developer. If you're new to my channel, consider subscribing. I make lots of different videos, including JavaScript and React tutorials, software engineering advice, and much more. Now, let's get right to Let's get right to it. First off, what is GitHub? GitHub is an online software engineering platform. It's used for storing, tracking, and collaborating on projects. But what does that really mean? It's really just the place where your code lives. A place where you can upload your code and others can see it. It's used by individuals working on projects in almost every software engineering company that you can imagine. Learning the ins and outs of Git is crucial to your software engineering career and beyond. What is a repository? That's a word that you'll hear very often. A lot of the time people say repo, it means the exact same thing. A repository is the most basic element of GitHub. It's a place where you can store your code and each file's revision history. Repositories can have multiple collaborators, and they can either be public or private. What I mean by that is that multiple people can work on one repository. If it's private, you can't find it, but if it's public, anyone can access that GitHub repository. A user can have as many repositories as they like on their GitHub profile, but it's best practice to have one repository for each project or code base that you're working on. If you're trying to start a project, if you're building a website, the best way to do that would be to create a new repository for your website code. Once you create your repository, the first branch that's already there is the main branch. The main branch should be the single source of truth for your repository. You can definitely work off of that main branch if you so choose, but I don't recommend it. You might go one step too far, create some bugs, etc. And if you've already committed to main, you really do end up in a bad spot. From our main branch, we can create any other branches that we want. If I was going to make any changes, I would create a branch and work in that branch. Whenever I've made my changes to that branch that I'd like to make and I'm happy with them, I can commit those changes to my branch. It's essentially similar to hitting save on a Word document. If I commit these changes locally, they'll just live locally on my machine. But then I push up the changes to GitHub, and then you can see them live on the GitHub server. Say I'm working at a code base in a company. The workflow would be to branch off a main or whatever default branch lives there, make my changes, commit the changes to that branch. Once my changes have been properly committed and I'm happy with those changes, I'd create something called a pull request. A pull request is the request to say, hey, I have this code on this branch. Are you happy with it? If so, I'll merge it into main. The typical workflow would be for other developers on your team to go to that pull request, review it, either make comments to say it needs changes, or hit approve. If your pull request gets approved, then it can be merged into main. Once it's merged into main, you'll see your changes that were in your branch in main as well. So what I have on the screen here is a repository that I've created. The first step is I have cloned this repo. Cloning a repo is just copying that repository onto your local machine. And depending on if you have write access, you might be able to push up code and you might not. GitHub has really good documentation when it comes to cloning, so I won't really walk through that in this video, but I definitely recommend you creating a repository that you have access to, that you can push code to, so that you can try this out and test this workflow. So like I said, I've already cloned this repo and now it lives on my machine. The first thing that I'm going to do is write git status. This shows me that I'm on the main branch. What I'm going to do is check out a branch, add a file, commit and push that code and create a pull request. So let's check out a branch. And the way to do that is to write git checkout /b. The /b is what says to create a new branch. And then I'm going to call this Emily/GitHub101. Hit enter. And now we'll see we've switched to a new branch called Emily/GitHub101. I'm just going to add a file and using VI. Just a way to quickly add a file, and it's using the terminal as your IDE, definitely not as user-friendly as something like WebStorm, etc. So I'm going to write VI, and then I'm going to call this file GitHub101. GitHub101. And now this is our new file. So I'm just going to write some text, and I'm just going to write, hi, it's code Emily. And then the next step, if I want to save this file, is I would do Control-C, and this is using a Mac. And then I would do a colon and WQ, exclamation point, and hit enter. And now if I do git status, you'll see we have a new file. And it also is an untracked file. So this means that this file isn't staged yet. So it means it's just kind of chilling. It's not ready to be committed because we haven't told it that it's ready to be committed. So what I would do is just do git add GitHub101. And now if I write git status, you'll see that this is green. That means that it's ready to be committed, it's added, it's staged, we're good to go. When it comes to committing, there's multiple different ways that we can do this. I could do git commit /a, and now we commit all the files that we've changed. For this example, it really doesn't matter because we're only committing one file. If I did all files, it would only commit this file. I'll just do git commit and then write GitHub 101. Hit enter, it'll bring you to this lovely UI. To begin with, write GitHub, Control-C, :WQ, exclamation point. What WQ means is write quit. So write quit, exclamation point, enter. And now we've committed our code. But we don't have a new branch in GitHub here. And that's because we haven't pushed the code, git push. I usually just write git push and then I just copy and paste this. So there's probably a more elegant way to do that, but I don't really care myself. So I just do copy and paste, hit enter. And now we'll see we have a new branch. And actually right when you push a new branch, GitHub will automatically come up with this little banner and it'll suggest you to create a pull request, which is a really handy little feature. So we're gonna go right into that. We're gonna write compare and pull request. We'll add a nice title, not that it matters too much because I mean, this is just a tutorial, but when you're working in a code base, you definitely wanna add a nice title and a nice description that tells exactly what you're doing. For this title, I'll just write add GitHub 101 file. Adding a file for this tutorial for lovely people of the internet. And now if I scroll down, you'll see that we're showing one changed file, one addition, 0 deletions. All this is just saying there's one file that's been added. This will give you any other information. Say if I deleted a file, this or that, it will show you here. Which is important right before you hit create to go through here and make sure that you're happy with your code. Self-reviewing before you're opening this pull request because it's kind of rude to waste other developers' time if you haven't reviewed your code yourself. So now all I'm gonna do is just create pull request. As I'm the only developer in this code base, I can of course just hit merge pull request right now, and I also haven't set up any permissions that are blocking main. If I was working in a code base, main would be typically locked. I wouldn't be able to merge until I had reviews on this pull request. Once they approve it, merge it right to main. So once I hit merge, I'm gonna confirm the merge. And now it says that it's actively been merged. If I go back to our code, you'll see GitHub 101 has this file. Keeping up to date with main on your branch is imperative. What I mean by this is when you originally create your branch, you're creating it off of whatever main was at that point in time. Say you're developing for a bit, maybe you're working on that branch for, I don't know, a couple days or however often, and you're working in a code base where other developers are working as well. Latest changes on main should then live on your branch as well, so that you're up to date with whatever lives on that main code base. So that whatever changes you make don't overlap with whatever changes someone else already made. A best practice here is to merge main into your local branch every morning. Commit often. Basically, whenever you're in a working state, commit. There's no limit on how many times you can commit to a branch. It's a lot easier to get back to your latest commit if something breaks than to try and figure out what point it was working and what code you added and this and that. Commit whenever everything works. Keep changes minimal for a pull request. Meaning if I'm working on a big feature, maybe try and condense them down to smaller pieces for pull requests so that other reviewers can easily review the changes that you've made. If your code by any chance causes a huge bug, hopefully that doesn't happen, but if it does, it's way easier to figure out what happened if you have small, minimal changes, rather than have a giant pull request where you have to go in and decipher what line it could be that caused the problem. If you have a smaller pull request, it's easier to just say, oh, it's probably this one thing I changed. Thank you so much for watching. This is the first of many videos about Git, and definitely leave a comment below if you have any specific questions or specific topics you'd like me to dive into a bit further. I plan on making a lot of different videos about different commands and how to use them. Merely just make your day easier when using Git. See you next time.